Why do we find ourselves drawn to characters who are fundamentally shattered? Think about it. When you consider your favorite protagonists, chances are they're not the pristine heroes with perfect moral compasses and unwavering confidence. Instead, we gravitate toward the damaged ones. The ones carrying psychological wounds, moral compromises, and internal contradictions that make them feel impossibly real. There's something profound happening when we connect with broken characters that goes beyond just entertainment. Brokenness creates deeper narrative resonance than surface perfection ever could. It establishes genuine emotional stakes and transforms passive observers into invested participants in the character's journey. Brokenness creates foundation for meaningful storytelling. It generates the internal conflict that drives external action, the vulnerability that makes strength feel earned, and the potential for transformation that keeps us turning pages. When Lisbeth Salander responds to trauma with violence and isolation, we don't recoil from her brokenness. We recognize something fundamentally human in her damaged responses. Her psychological wounds create authentic connection because they reflect the messy reality of how people actually process pain and survival. This is the power of flawed protagonists. They mirror our own internal struggles in ways that flawless heroes simply cannot. Walter White's descent into moral depravity resonates because we understand the seductive pull of justifying terrible choices through desperate circumstances. His compromises feel plausible because they emerge from recognizable human weaknesses. Gollum's split personality and his internal contradictions create compelling character dynamics. He simultaneously loves and hates the ring, calling it precious while cursing its hold over him. He craves connection while pushing others away, helping Frodo and Sam one moment, then plotting their destruction the next. He maintains fragments of his former self while embracing his corrupted nature. Smeagol's lingering empathy warring with Gollum's consuming obsession. Brokenness reveals character depth through vulnerability rather than strength. When a character's psychological wounds are exposed, we see past their external actions into their internal world. Their fears, their desperate attempts at control, their self-destructive patterns all become windows into genuine human complexity. This psychological authenticity emerges from the way broken characters navigate their internal obstacles. They don't have neat solutions or perfect responses. Instead, they stumble through emotional terrain marked by old wounds, developing coping mechanisms that sometimes help and sometimes harm. This messy reality creates characters who feel lived in rather than constructed. Flawed protagonists make victory feel earned rather than inevitable. When a broken character overcomes their internal obstacles to achieve something meaningful, we feel the weight of their struggle. Their success carries emotional resonance because we witnessed the internal battle that made it possible. The story elements surrounding these characters often intensify their brokenness in fascinating ways. Magic systems can amplify internal conflicts, forcing characters to confront their psychological wounds through external power. World pressures can exploit existing vulnerabilities, creating situations where characters must choose between their survival instincts and their moral aspirations. This authenticity transforms the experience. We're witnessing fellow humans struggle with the same fundamental questions that haunt us all. How do we overcome our past? Can we change who we are? What happens when our greatest strengths emerge from our deepest wounds? The answer lies in understanding that brokenness isn't a character flaw to be overlooked. It's the foundation that makes transformation possible and meaningful. Here's where broken characters reveal their true narrative power. Their flaws create the potential for transformation. Bruce Wayne doesn't become Batman despite his trauma, but because of it. The death of his parents creates the very drive that transforms him from a helpless child into someone who refuses to let others experience that same helplessness. This is brokenness functioning as narrative fuel. The character's deepest wounds become the engine driving their story arc. Broken characters are inherently flawed and usually have some tragic past event that justifies their brokenness, creating characters with depth and motivations that also resonate with audiences. In other cases, narrative events drive the brokenness, like Light Yagami's moral deterioration in Death Note. His conflict between his desire for justice and his growing God complex creates escalating consequences. Each moral compromise he makes internally cascades into increasingly dangerous external actions, which creates his own psychological fracturing. This psychological fracturing in turn drives the rest of the story forward. The journey from broken to healing drives story momentum in ways that flawless characters simply cannot match. In Arcane, Jinx's struggle with identity and belonging stem from a traumatic event between her and her sister Vi. Jinx's instability becomes a coping mechanism to regain control over her life. Her internal chaos creates external chaos, forcing other characters to respond and adapt, creating a ripple effect that drives conflict. Character arcs depend on this relationship between internal wounds and external transformation. Protagonists grapple with the question of whether they'll overcome or fall victim to their core psychological wounds. This internal struggle creates genuine suspense because the outcome feels uncertain. The tension between who they are and who they could become becomes the heart of compelling storytelling. Broken characters exist in this liminal space where transformation is possible, but not guaranteed. They carry within themselves both the potential for growth and the risk of destruction. Some characters discover that their brokenness becomes their greatest strength. Their psychological wounds, when properly channeled, transform into sources of power and purpose. The experiences that damage them become the foundation for their ability to help others or achieve something meaningful. Their scars become their superpowers, not in spite of their pain, but because of how they've learned to transform it. The most powerful broken characters are those whose flaws create both obstacles and opportunities. Their psychological wounds generate problems they must solve, while simultaneously providing them with unique insights or abilities that help them address those problems. This creates a cycle where their brokenness becomes both their greatest challenge and their most valuable asset. What emerges is storytelling that feels organic and inevitable, while remaining surprising and engaging. The character's internal journey drives external events in ways that feel authentic. Broken characters often have traits that contrast against their brokenness, like physical beauty or a selfless character. These contrasting aspects emphasize and resonate with audiences that feel just how unfair or unjust a broken character's situation is. The most profound moments in storytelling happen when broken characters display unexpected virtue. When someone carrying deep psychological wounds chooses compassion over cruelty, sacrifice over self-preservation, or hope over despair, that choice carries weight that perfect characters can never achieve. Think about Snape's final revelation. His past cruelty and bitterness make his ultimate sacrifice more meaningful, not less. His brokenness doesn't diminish his heroism, it amplifies it. When someone who has every reason to choose darkness instead chooses light, that choice becomes transformative for both character and audience. This is how brokenness creates compelling drama through the clash between good intentions and ingrained flaws. Characters want to do the right thing, but their psychological wounds create obstacles to that desire. Watching them struggle against their own internal barriers generates genuine tension. Consider how redemption arcs work when they emerge from authentic struggle. A character doesn't simply decide to become better. Instead, they fight against patterns of behavior rooted in deep psychological wounds. They backslide, make progress, face internal resistance, and slowly earn their transformation through repeated choices to act against their damaged instincts. This struggle makes character growth feel earned rather than arbitrary. When we witness someone overcome their psychological barriers to help others or make moral choices, we feel the weight of that victory because we understand the internal battle it required. The most powerful heroism often emerges from characters we least expect it from. The broken characters who seem irredeemable, who carry the deepest wounds and display the most destructive patterns, sometimes surprise us with moments of profound goodness. These moments feel miraculous because they emerge from such unlikely sources. Sometimes psychological wounds can create the very strength needed for transformation. Someone who has experienced abandonment might develop a fierce loyalty to those they care about. A character who has faced powerlessness might develop an unshakable determination to protect others from similar experiences. Their scars become sources of empathy, strength, and purpose. The virtue that emerges from struggle feels more valuable than virtue that comes naturally. When a character's goodness is hard-won, fought for against internal resistance, it carries emotional resonance that effortless goodness cannot match. Their moral victories feel significant because we understand the internal cost required to achieve them. The truth about broken characters is that their brokenness isn't a flaw to overcome in storytelling, it's the foundation that makes transformation meaningful. Their psychological wounds create the internal conflict that drives compelling narratives, the vulnerability that generates authentic connection, and the potential for growth that keeps us invested in their journey. When we embrace broken characters, we're acknowledging something profound about the human experience. We're recognizing that strength often emerges from struggle, that wisdom comes through suffering, and that the most beautiful transformations happen when someone rises above their own darkness. Your favorite characters probably aren't the perfect ones. They're the damaged ones who fight against their own internal barriers to become something better. They're the ones whose scars tell stories of survival and whose flaws make their virtues shine brighter. Consider your own favorite flawed characters. What wounds do they carry? How do those wounds fuel their journey? What makes their moments of virtue feel so powerful? Share your thoughts in the comments about which broken characters have captured your heart and why their brokenness makes them beautiful.